SEGA Bits presents SEGA Talk, a podcast talking all things SEGA with your hosts, George and Barry.
Look, it's a giant talking egg. I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the master here. So what?
Hello everyone and welcome to the new episode of SEGA Talk. This one's an extra spooky episode and I'm here with Barry. That sounded like Barry. We're from SegaBits.com. If you guys never been there, we're a Sega news site. And today we're going to be talking about The House of the Dead, which came out in 1996. September 13th, 1996 to be exact, in Japan for arcades. Later in 1997 in the rest of the world. First, before we get into the game and the development of the game, I want to talk about the title of the game. I always thought it was a weird title. It's The House of the Dead. Like, it's owned by the dead. So there's probably like a lease to the house, and like they had a cosign. It was probably a huge mess. And the game doesn't even take place in a house, does it? Really, like in a mansion, right? The Curran Mansion.
Yeah. Hi, this is Barry, by the way. That zombie speaking earlier, that wasn't me. The House of the Dead, the only thing I can really think of is that it might have been inspired by the early Universal monster movies, which had titles. There was a House of Frankenstein. And so it could have gotten inspiration from that, but even in House of Frankenstein, there really wasn't a House of Frankenstein. You know what I mean?
No, like he didn't own the house and pay taxes on it.
Yeah, exactly. Mortgage. You know, that wasn't going on.
He's like trying to figure out who to vote for, Obama or Hillary.
Housing deductible.
Yeah. I was going to say, but this game, like it's a weird title. It's obviously very Japanese in nature, I guess. Or maybe like you said, it was just inspired by older kind of same ridiculousness titles.
Yeah.
It was made by Sega AM1, which turned into Sega WoW Entertainment, right? Mm-hmm. And they wanted to make their first rail shooter was supposed to be a cop shooter, but in 1994 or 1995, AM2 released the hugely successful Virtua Cop, so they wanted to go a different direction for this game. And this is Takashi Oda, the director of the game. Said this in a 1997 interview with the official Sega Saturn magazine. It began in December of last year. I had finished Puzzle and Action Treasure Hunt development, and our team was talking about making a light gun game. We didn't know what kind of gun game to make, and were a lot of different ideas at first, including a police-themed game. But we wanted to distinguish ourselves from Sega AM2 development team at Sega, and after taking it over with our section chief, we settled on the idea of making a zombie game. What do you think about that, like changing it to a zombie game? I think 1996 was also the year that Resident Evil first came out, so zombie games were in the mainstream.
I think it was a wise decision. I feel like AM2, just in terms of the feel of their games, it's always a very kind of squeaky clean, bright and shiny sort of style, you know, like race cars and police cops and, you know, fighting next to a blue ocean. And I feel
to me AM2 was always like the company that always made all those games where like some kid in the 80s was like, fuck yeah, this is awesome, like driving a Ferrari, driving a combat plane, or you know what I mean?
Right. And so I feel like with the direction that they finally did take it, that it gave them their own sort of, look and feel within Sega. You know, at the time it was just AM1, AM2, AM3. And so I feel like, you know, when you mentioned that they later became WoW, that immediately put in my head the types of games that WoW would make, which includes the later House of the Dead games. So I feel like it's very much their style. I did want to mention, too, that, you know, like you said with Virtua Cop, that was the first major 3D light gun game, correct?
Yeah, that's right. It kind of brought the genre back to the mainstream that was kind of stagnant for a while.
Right, and so you could almost say that Sega kicked off another major type of game right there. And so But yeah, it's just that's just what I wanted to mention.
You just wanted to let everybody know that Sega was the one that created this little bubble in the mid-90s where everybody had to have a light gun shooter at this time. Mm-hmm. So Sega had multiple ones going on, this being the other big one. I want to say that I've seen more House of the Dead arcade games in US places than I've seen Virtua Cop.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I've been to more than enough arcades where they have, at the very least, 2, 3, and 4, like all situated together. I've been to a few which had 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is just insane. Like an entire franchise sitting right there, 20 years old, in the arcade still.
And one of the things that the director of the game, Oda, he said that he wanted to aim at the game at people from their mid-20s to their mid-30s. And I think we were children when this game came out, but I remember seeing it I'm like, holy crap, this thing looks so violent. Like, this game was ridiculously violent. And then they just had it in the malls. They had it right there where kids in pizza places. So you walk in and it'd be this game where you literally shoot flesh off of zombies.
Oh, yeah.
And it was bloody. And nobody blinked an eye. I'm not around me, but I'm like, why are you... Everybody's just letting this happen.
Yeah, I mean, in preparation of this episode, I played a little Virtua Cop and I played a little House of the Dead. Virtua Cop, it's so, like I was saying, squeaky clean. I mean, sure, these guys have guns, they're shooting at you, but when you shoot them, they just kind of throw their gun in the air and lean backwards and go, ah. In this one, you shoot at the zombies, or they call them the undead, I guess, or whatever, and they break apart, their eyeballs fly out, there's a ton of blood, so it's awesome. But it's just, yeah, you're putting this out there, and even today, there aren't arcades do not have an age restriction. People aren't going to stop you from playing a game because it's too violent. And I kind of am half wondering right now, maybe even arcade games kind of scaled things back to make it a little more age appropriate nowadays.
Oh, yeah, and I was going to say, you talked about destroying the body of the zombies. They kind of went into this. Did you know that the game was 50% motion captured, aspects of it, and 50% was obviously hand animated, which is kind of rare. I think one of the first games to do motion capture was Virtua Fighter 2, I want to say. So it's kind of rare at this point, but 50%, that's kind of a lot. I'm not saying that there was a lot of game. This game is rather short,
Yeah.
But... did that make a difference? Did you ever see the game and go, wow, this is motion captured?
Well, I will say that the enemies in Virtua Cop, they are very kind of robotic. Whereas here, these zombies, they don't have guns. But when they're walking at you, there is something, obviously it's a video game. And on top of that, they look like weird green undead creatures. But the fact that they move a little bit like humans is off-putting and scary. And so I think it works. If you were to just have it 100% hand animated, unless you had a really good animator, it would just come off as a goofy a goofy video game character coming at you, and it wouldn't be as scary at all.
No, I agree with you 100%. And the other thing you talked about was just destroying the flesh. According to the team, they literally had to do 2 models for each of the creatures, because it had to be one with their flesh completely torn off and one with their flesh completely intact. And so that meant double work. And I think it was worth it. I mean, I think that's one of the highlights of those House of the Dead games. It feels satisfying shooting the zombies, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And also, I don't know if it's planned to talk about, but another development thing that they had planned was actually you could kick the zombies, but they never implemented that because it turned out people would probably be kicking the hell out of very expensive arcade machine hardware and breaking it. So.
Oh yeah, but it would have been pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's one thing I always wanted to do in Resident Evil when they trap you. They're like, why can't I just kick them?
Yeah.
That's what I would do in real life.
Yeah.
I just kick the zombie.
Well, and the thing is they finally did do that in Rise of Nightmares, so that's pretty cool. But
so I was going to talk about the gameplay of the game. I mean, it's a light gun game, so you have a light gun. The gun has 6 rounds with your first weapon. They have torches that represent your life. The torches all disappear. The light goes out for you, so that means you're dead. And you have to help civilians, and there's multiple endings, which became a staple of the franchise. What are your thoughts of the whole? I mean, the gun thing is not new. There's a bunch of games with light guns, even in consoles. We had the NES one and then the phaser on the Master System. But did you ever play it just because you wanted to hold the gun and shoot things on screen?
Oh, of course. I mean,
that was the thing. You know what? They used to take double quarters from me. Because, like, I used to buy two, and I'd feel like a real badass with two guns.
Oh,
I mean,
for
of
sure.
course, I couldn't shoot worth shit. But,
yeah, I mean,
it was nice.
I mean, I know definitely the later Sega light gun game, LA Machine Guns, where you're holding that big thing, that feels really good. With this game, they didn't have recoil on the first game. I don't think they didn't update it later. So it didn't feel like you were actually shooting a gun. But like you mentioned, with the break-apart zombies, when you're shooting at them, that's something that a lot of games earlier, and I guess in a sense since, didn't have. And so you really felt like you were shooting these things. It wasn't like, aim in the general area, and when you hit them, they'll go, and have a single animation. Like, like those video shooting games like Mad Dog McCree, where there's one animation.
Yeah, and I think a lot of games don't even have that still, like flesh coming off and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty fantastic. I mean, it was pretty interesting to do back then. The one thing that the game does is you have to shoot off screen to reload. This is the first game I ever played that did that. I don't know which is the first game. I know Virtua Cop did it, mm-hmm. But this game was the first one I played that did it, and it blew my mind. I was like, yeah, all right. That's fantastic. How does it know? How does it know where I'm shooting?
And nowadays, when you're shooting a real gun, you just aim into the air and think it's going to reload.
Yeah, of course. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
You're just like, why isn't it reloading?
Yeah.
It works in houses. The director talked about the aiming system they used. Takashi Oda said, as for difficulties with the gameplay system, our first point of reference in creating House of the Dead was Virtua Cop. That game uses something called lock-on sight system, which help distinguish the players with which enemies are tough or weak, which are near, far, easy to hit, etc. But in House of the Dead, the enemies walk towards you, thus gradually becoming larger targets the closer they get. It was extremely challenging for us to try and create a suitable game-like difficulty in a gun game where aiming is so easy. So, like, that's something I never really think about when you play a game. Like, I'm like, Virtua Cop and House of the Dead, they're the same engine. They just copied and switched.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, the gameplay is totally different in both games. Like, the zombies walk up at you. The other ones, they have guns.
Yeah, and in Virtua Cop, just from my memories of playing the game, the camera would shift around a lot. It was very hand-holdy. And there were those circles that would go around the enemies and kind of close, meaning that the more it closes, the more danger you're in. And it very much told you, shoot this guy now. All right, you shot him. Now shoot this guy now. But with House of the Dead, I feel that, there would be times when there would be a couple enemies on the screen, and you really just had to shoot at whichever one you felt like shooting. Oftentimes you should be shooting at the one that's closer to you. But I feel like that's a much more organic way of playing. It is, like you said, you thought that it was just the same game with different elements basically plopped into place, but it is and isn't, because that is the same sort of aspect that they were doing in Virtua Cop, but it's more organic, I guess I'm trying to say.
This is also a moment in Sega history where they were just like plopping games, you know what I mean? Like, they had so many games releasing. Like, we're going to be talking about games that came out this year, and there's like 3 at least, like big Sega games at least. So it's like, this is one of the teams that was plopping out hits, and this team, like they talked about in the interview, I didn't put the quote on here, but they talk about how they always wanted to be number 1, and their biggest challenge was being better than AM2 because they were rivals.
Oh.
So it's crazy because, like, if you talk to most people, they'd be, oh no, AM2 was the king of arcade games. But like, these guys made so many big hits, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
So yeah, and the game, this is actually a very interesting point of this game. Like, there were zombies, right? And then you would get to the boss, and then like the boss was just random. Like, it wasn't a zombie. What the fuck was it? It was like a monster. So like,
yeah,
they were just creatures. Like, oh, what? What's the story behind this creature? Oh, some doctor made him. He's crazy. Who gives a crap? And so they would have like their weak points. and then it would tell you how to shoot them. Usually it was just in the center of the body for the first game. There wasn't that much uniqueness going around. And each of the bad guys had a tarot card they were based on. Mm-hmm. And the ones used in this game were the Chariot, the Hanged Man, the Hermit, and the Magician. Did you know about the tarot card thing?
Yeah, I did. I picked up on that. It was something I picked up on later. But because as a kid, you're not like, oh, yay, look, Dad, it's the Hermit, the tarot card. But
that's right, son.
It is interesting, and I know it is something that actually carried over again to name drop it. Rise of Nightmares also carries over that sort of tarot.
If you guys haven't noticed, Barry is a huge fan of Rise of Nightmares, and I want to play it, dude. I want to play it so bad. I don't have a Connect, but I've been hearing some other people talk about it on podcasts. Yes, it's still being played by people. And it sounds very interesting. It sounds like a very hidden gem on the Kinect.
Well, hey, Sega's going to be making a Rise of Nightmares movie according to their portfolio that they're shopping around with. So who knows?
Such a weird one. It's probably because the House of the Dead name is so tainted already, considering the old movies.
Which is a shame because it's such a great game.
And so yeah, I knew about the tarot card stuff aspect of the game because. When I was in the mall one time, somebody I was hanging out with told me about it, and I was like, oh, I guess I never noticed that. That's cool. Mm-hmm. But I guess it's a big deal because each game in the series has done it, and apparently there's still 5 cards they haven't used. So people are saying that there might be another game in the works. Maybe not. So let's talk about the game's story.
All right.
The game's story takes place in December 18th, 1998, which... It's pretty close to Christmas. You play as a AMS agent, Rogan, and he gets a short distress call from Sophie Richards, which is his fiance, in Curran's mansion. That's where the call came from. So you decide to go check it out, and Agent G is just waiting for you, and now he's your partner, and you have to kill these zombies with this fantastic voice work. The actors in this game. Actually, the actors in this game are better than the actors in the sequel, I think.
Oh, really?
I think. I don't know. They're both pretty bad. I mean, it's insane. I always thought it was on purpose. Somebody told me that they were 100% serious performances. I feel like I thought it was supposed to be making fun of B movies. Like, how when you watch a B movie and you're like, oh, that's so bad, it's so good. But apparently not. Apparently it's trying to be 100% legitimate acting. What was your take on the acting in this game? And this is 1996, by the way, so there wasn't that many voice acting in video games to compare it to.
I think at the time, I don't have a distinct memory of playing the game when it released. I know I played it soon after, though. And at the time, I'm sure I just thought it was cool to hear people talking. And also, having played in arcades recently, you don't really hear the games that well. They're pretty quiet or they're drowned out. And so I feel like it was the home release where you really started to hear, I guess, the cracks in the game, the bad voice acting. Don't come. My God. Those sorts of things.
And you know what? The game got really quotable after it came out. I mean, does it hurt the franchise that it had bad acting in the first couple games in the mid-90s? I don't think so, because... Resident Evil is still a huge franchise, and the voice work on the first game is pretty pathetic.
Oh, for sure.
So I don't say that kills it. I think I think they should just embrace that bad acting and just run with it because it's been a staple for the series so long, and just be like, yeah, we're making fun of B movies. Deal with it if you don't like it. It's like Sharknado.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of funny too because House of the Dead Overkill totally embraced that B-movie aspect, and yet it had some really good voice acting.
And our site contributor, Patrick, has a website called The House, the Website of the Dead?
Yes.
Where he's a huge fan of the franchise. You guys should check it out if you guys want. He did an interview with Oda, the director of the games, and he said that if he ever made a sequel, this is before Overkill or around there? No, actually it was after Overkill. He wanted to do a prequel, which is kind of weird because Overkill takes place 8 years before this. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I guess that's already happened. What are your take on this? What do you think is a better introduction for people, like Overkill or the first game?
I'd have to say the first game, and I it's not so much because Overkill is a better game or it overshadows it, but I feel just that it's such a modern game that when you go in and play this is going to feel very sparse and small, and you're not going to be hearing any F-bombs, so that might throw you. I mean, I'd say play them in order, because this definitely does not line up very well if you were to go from Overkill to the original House of the Dead.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And so let's talk about the release of the game. The game came out. It was actually surprisingly popular game. Like, this is one of the games, along with Daytona, Crazy Taxi, and like Outrun, that like just got wide arcade releases, and one of the few that got popular in the United States, which me and Barry live in the United States, so we're biased here. I don't live in the UK. I can't tell you if it was popular in the UK or Japan, but I could tell you that it was popular in the United States. Do you remember like just randomly seeing the cabinet, and what was your first impressions of just seeing the cabinet?
Well, the cabinet, it's kind of scary. Like, as a kid, you see it and you're like, oh man, I bet this game's really scary. And that sounds stupid, probably to a modern day audience and modern day kids hearing this, but back then 3D games were not something you would have at home usually. Like back in 1996, 97, you'd be lucky to have a console that has 3D graphics. Typically, you would still be playing your Sega Genesis or your Super Nintendo. So it was a treat to go to the arcade and experience these graphics. And then on top of that, when you get the scary sort of, zombies in it, I remember playing the game, but being a little scared at the same time, which I'm sure is their goal of the development team, is to make a game that scares you. And, I keep coming back, too, because, you might be scared of these zombies, but you got a gun, so you can shoot them. So...
That's true, and I remember looking at it and being like, holy crap, it has real guns, that's so awesome. And then like looking at the artwork, and I'm like, these zombies look so incredible. But it's funny because like a couple of years prior to this, I wouldn't play Ninja Gaiden because like it had a dragon on the cover. And I'm like, oh, that dragon looks fucking scary, I don't want to play this, it's gonna fucking kill me. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of weird that I like kind of grew into the whole horror thing in a couple of years, and I was like, yeah, this game I want to play. I was pretty excited. It's probably one of the better zombie games of that year. I mean, Resident Evil was cool, but this was a fast-paced action.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's what I like. So let's talk about the mainstream reception for this game. Back in the day, Indianapolis was trying to ban violent video games because they distort the view of our children, I guess. Back in the 90s, destroyed me and Barry's childhood.
I killed people.
We're violent criminals. I do too, just on secret though.
Yeah.
Don't tell anybody. Yeah. Especially zombies. And the U.S. Appeals Court Judge Richard Posner reviewed the game, and this is what he had to say about the game. The most violent game in the record, The House of the Dead, depicts zombies being killed flamboyantly. Ooh. With much severing limbs and effusions of blood, but so stylized and potentially fictitious is the cartoon-like depiction that no one would suppose it as obscene, in sense in which a paragraph of a person being decapitated might be described as obscene. It will not turn anyone's stomach. So yeah, it was he was obviously being very rational.
Yeah.
When it came to this, it's obviously fictitious. What are your thoughts? Do you think that the U.S. judgment system should even ban games like The House of the Dead because it depicts horror? And this isn't a kind of game that you have to be ID'd before you played, and this was before the whole IDing and console owning. Like right now, it's really, I guess, pushed. Like if you go buy a console game, you get ID'd. I get ID'd. I don't know why, but. What do you think? Like, you think that these kind of games should have even been public for me and you to play?
I mean, first off, I do think it should be public because people have a choice to enter an arcade. People have a choice to put their money in it. And if you're a parent and you're allowing your kids to do this, and you're against it, then you should be watching over your kids to make sure they don't do these sorts of things. Otherwise, it's your own damn fault that your kid got to the arcade, had the money to play the game, and played the game. Secondly,
I agree.
Yeah.
Go on.
I was going to say, secondly, I what I think's interesting about this whole case with the Indianapolis judge, so the idea was that the game, it was an obscene game and wasn't protected under the First Amendment of the United States. I don't know why they're going that direction, but what I find so funny is that the judge didn't think it warranted a ban, and it wasn't because he looked at it and went, this is a video game. It's no different from a book or a piece of art or a movie or a TV show. We're not banning those sorts of things. And yet, the reason instead that he protected it was that he thought it still looked a little cartoon-like, and he thought it was stylized enough, and it was obviously fictitious, that it didn't require a ban. Now, I'm wondering, you take that judge at that time and you show him, you know, some of the hyper-realistic, violent games that are out there right now, and I wonder what he would say. I wonder how he approached Mortal Kombat when it came out. Because on one hand, it's a win for House of the Dead that it didn't get banned. On the other hand, it's kind of a loss just because the only reason it didn't get banned was because the judge saw it and thought, it's a little cartoony. It's fake. It's all right. You know?
Yeah, and that's kind of stupid, right? If you think about it, it's like, who cares what the violence is? Like you said, it should be up to the parent. I think the only issue we have here is that, like, a lot of people put them in public areas. Like, I would go to a restaurant sometimes, and some restaurants would have a House of the Dead machine. It's like, what? All right. Get some guts in before I eat some food.
Right.
But, you know what? That's the place of business. If you have a problem with that, go tell the place of business. Why do you have this freaking zombie murdering simulator?
Right.
As
it is an interesting point you raised there, because arcade games, to my knowledge, are one of the few kind of forms of entertainment out there where there is, like, I guess nowadays, age restrictions posted on the outside. There's no one there to stop you from playing it. No one's carding you. You can do that with movies. You can do that with video games. I don't think people do that with books. I feel like any kid could go into a bookstore and buy a book that's super violent. I guess just because it's the written word, it's not as, seen as obscene. But yeah, arcade games, not that I ever want this to happen, but it is kind of surprising that you can just walk in and play whatever you want.
Yeah, there's nobody there going like, what are you doing, kid?
But I guess
killing zombies.
Yeah, but I guess that's where the parents come into play. Like, if your kids are freely roaming and walking into arcades, and you don't like that, crack down on it. Don't blame the arcade. No. Don't blame the games.
I agree 100% with you, but, like, I don't have a kid right now, so I agree. But when I have a kid, I'd be like, it's the government's problem to be taking care of my child, not my problem.
Right.
Of course. So yeah, the game. Okay, what do you think about him saying you flamboyantly kill zombies? Like, I never You're the user, dude. You're the one with the guns. If you're doing it flamboyantly, good for you, Judge. But don't judge me on how I play the House of the Dead.
I think he means it's just over the top. However, the way he uses flamboyantly, and I don't want to offend anyone, but yeah, it's almost like, all right, guys, let's go in there and just kill some zombies. You know,
look at these. Look at what they're wearing. They're so dirty.
What do you think of my new shirt? I'm gonna kill some zombies in it. You know, flamboyantly killing zombies. Oh, I got him.
Okay. They should just make it. Oh God, I know. I'm gonna get crap for this, but I just want to play as a gay guy that's just so flamboyant now in the game. They just be super flamboyant. You never see that in the game. Come on, man.
That's true.
Flamboyant. There is flamboyant game. It's not a stereotype. I mean, I guess it is a stereotype.
Well, on the complete opposite, in Overkill, Isaac Washington was almost too gruff and manly to the point of it being just ridiculous. You know?
Oh yeah, that game. That whole game was ridiculous. I was like, holy crap! They're really going. It just kept on upping the ante on the ridiculousness.
Yeah, and leave it to AM2 to eventually create a gay character in the form of I forgot the name, but in Shenmue 2 they had that gay couple.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna say Ryu from Shenmue. I was like,
come on.
Maybe. Come on, dude. Nozomi was like, come on, dude. You basically have sexual intercourse with me, and he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna go play arcade games.
Well, not to go completely off track, but since then the Shenmue 3 website has stated that I believe they said he's not gay or something like that, so they're backpedaling.
The fact that I never even thought that. The fact that they have to freaking they come out and be like, no, he's not gay, dude. Trust me. Yeah. I know him.
Yeah.
I know him personally. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
So the arcade game. Oh, sorry. You want me to say something?
No,
about,
I think we've gone too far off track.
The House of the Dead got ports a couple of years later, or a year later, on the Sega Saturn and the PC, and they were not very good ports. I should have checked who made the ports. I don't think it was Sega AM1 though. And that was the only time the arcade game got ports that I could think of. And what are your thoughts on the ports? And what are your thoughts of it never being re-released again? Like Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4 have gotten re-releases. Overkill has gotten more re-releases. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a shame because, it is a classic Sega game. I think when people think of the House of the Dead, however, they think of the House of the Dead 2. Like, even I did. In preparation for this episode, I was thinking, I just played House of the Dead 2. And then I looked at it, I'm like, no, it's House of the Dead, the original. There's none of that, the water and all those things. That's the sequel. You're not in Venice. Yeah. And so, it's a shame that it doesn't get more play. The Sega Saturn version, I have the Japanese version. So I have to dig up my Japanese Saturn to actually play it. But the US version's very rare. It's very expensive, which is a shame. Like you mentioned, the PC version isn't as good, and you use the mouse. Like, how fun is that? Not fun at all.
You want to click on things, dude?
No.
Yeah, I know. You just click on the zombies, click them away. I agree with you. It's just, it's really sad that we won't get like a definitive version of this game. I've heard rumors online. When I say rumors online, I mean people on YouTube sections, comment sections, say that Sega lost the code for this game or something. I could see it because a lot of games from this era have gotten their codes lost. So that's kind of shameful. I guess we'll never see a port, maybe.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind a remake of the game from the ground up, maybe. But I think Sega is so far past this whole thing that I don't think we'll ever see it.
Yeah.
But then who knows? I mean, we got House of the Dead typing of the Dead Overkill or whatever.
Yeah.
On PC, so maybe they're still thinking that the franchise has some sales in it, to milk.
I hope so, though I remember the development story behind the House of the Dead, or the typing of the Dead Overkill. Wasn't the game finished like in a guy's house? Like the company folded, or the development team folded, and just like a few people finished it in their free time.
Isn't that weird though? Like I've noticed that this is a trend, and I don't know if it's just Sega curse or Sega just being really bad publisher in general, but like a lot of people that work with Sega go out of business, or you never hear from them again. Like there was the guy that did the mobile game that won awards for only iPhone, Hiroki, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And then they did the team that did the game with the little with the little bunny from hell. Hell yeah. They went out of business. Then the company that did there's other companies that did a bunch of other stuff.
Oh man.
And they just never successful, and they go out of business.
Are you telling me that
sad.
Game Freak's going to go out of business and we'll see no more Pokemon games?
I'm saying that 100%. That Game Freak is going to post in 6 months that they're out of business when Sun and Moon comes out. Believe me, I've seen their tax returns.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Donald Trump.
No problem. So usually when we do these episodes, we like to talk about the media that came out in this era to give you that nostalgic trip to remember the times of when the game came out. Let's talk about the movies that came out. We know that Seven was a big influence in this game. We're not going to be talking about Seven, but if you want to say anything about Seven before we go into this, you can say that, Barry.
I mean, I know you told me you didn't really see any of the similarities. I totally can see how you couldn't see that. The things that stood out to me, though, was the two cops working together on this case, walking around, going from place to place. The other big thing was the aesthetics. If you look at the opening title sequence to 7, it's very similar to the stage introductions and even the opening to the House of the Dead, where it's kind of scratchy, a little faded, showing kind of weird things like weird text and photographs. It's more of a tone than anything in terms of the story or the characters.
Well, there you go. And yeah, now that you say it, I could actually, I guess, picture it. I was thinking more like, there's no zombies in 7. What the fuck is he talking about?
Yeah.
There's no evil doctors in here. But okay, so big movies in 1997. I put the top 5 movies of 1996. Independence Day, which is not surprising. It had Will Smith. It was a huge movie. Twister, Mission Impossible, Jerry Maguire, and Ransom. I've never seen Ransom, but I've seen the rest of these movies.
Well, I could definitely say that it takes a lot of inspiration from Jerry Maguire.
Wow.
Because when he says, "Show me the money," and House of the Dead was very successful in the arcades.
Ah, I see. He was talking about going to the arcades afterwards with your money.
Yeah.
In the movie.
Yeah.
That's what I figured too. That's what I got out of it when I watched the movie. I was like, I like this guy. He's pretty good.
Yeah, no, but to be honest, nothing really stands out to me. And I know sometimes when we talk about the movies too, it's always a year before just because of the development. So like you mentioned, 7 was 1995. And just looking, I guess, the movie Heat, that's a very gritty movie, very dark movie. So,
Twister obviously did the level from Sonic Adventure where you're in the Twister. Obviously, it's Twister, the movie, right?
Of course.
I hated that movie. God, I hated that movie when it came out. Who makes a movie of like a natural phenomenon that's not even that like cool? Like, how do you write a movie based on only Hollywood, dude?
Yeah, only Hollywood. Now
like, I want to make one called Sprinklers, where like I get wet in the sprinkler and I have to like run across the lawn.
Wet shirt. His shirt was wet.
And he didn't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, slow motion getting wet. Ooh, when it's all cold, when it first hits you.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that whereas AM2 felt very inspired by the films and TV shows of the time, I can't really pin anything outside of, like you mentioned, 7 on the House of the Dead, but I think that's because the game takes inspiration from much older materials, like the 1970s and the 1960s kind of grindhouse films. The Dawn of the Dead, Day of the Dead, those sorts of movies. And then, of course, like I was mentioning with the House of Frankenstein, like obviously they were probably lifting from that sort of title.
Back then when monsters could actually own houses, I remember that.
yeah,
it's
exactly.
Good times.
Exactly.
We need to change the law in this country, man. We need more TV shows where families of monsters live in a house.
Make America monsters.
The monsters.
Again.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, 1996 was a huge year for video game franchises that made their debut. Some of these are actually debut games. Some of these are actually just sequels that I wanted to put in here because I could do that.
Yeah.
Pokemon Red and Green released in Japan. Time Crisis came out a couple years after Virtua Cop. Virtua Cop. Rip off, everybody, boo! Virtua Cop 2 came out. Actually, I think Time Crisis is a great game.
Oh, I love Time Crisis.
Resident Evil made its debut. Metal Slug. Knights. We should do an episode on Knights. But anyway, Virtua Fighter 3. Super Mario 64. Dead or Alive. And Fighting Vipers. So Sega had a crap load of games that were 3D at this time.
Yeah.
As you can see. Any of those games that I guess... I wasn't that into Pokemon, but... It was crazy. Remember that? The Pokemon era?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, I didn't own a Game Boy, but Pokemon was one of the few games that made me think, I guess I gotta get one. And I never did. But, yeah.
But I was gonna say, there's also Time Crisis. How do you think that kind of changed the pace? I mean, that was a huge, successful light gun game. I think the two biggest light gun games I hear people talk about right now, like if I talk to them right now about the old days, I guess, the mid-90s ones, it would be House of the Dead and Time Crisis always get brought up. I feel like Time Crisis overshadowed Virtua Cop in the United States. Do you think that's true?
I totally think that's true, and as much as I love the Virtua Cop games, going back to what I've said a few times already on this show, I feel like AM2 was too squeaky clean for its own good sometimes. And so, like with with like their games, it would be like, this is Virtua Fighting, this is Virtua Racing, this is a Virtua Cop. And, kids don't really, kids don't think, oh, cool, a cop, I'm going to be a cop. And then you compare that to Time Crisis, where it's like you're a time traveler, cop kind of deal, that's so much cooler. So
and it's funny. It's funny because I don't think Time Crisis would even exist if there was no Virtual Cop to begin with. It like took that framework and it's like, let's put a twist in it and it'll make it funner. It's kind of like, I guess they would say it's kind of like Namco at this time was playing catch up with Sega. Like they were like, oh, you did this? That's great. But this is how I'll change it and make it better.
Right.
And they were just basically grabbing their AM2's recipes and like changing it up. Like this year, Tekken 2 came out. So Virtua Fighter 3 came out and then Tekken 2 came out.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh yeah, you're just taking what Virtua Fighter did and then you're switching it around and giving it your own flavor and then releasing it and beating them. Because Namco was beating AM2 in their own game.
Right. And I
like
think
Tekken was more popular and so was Time Crisis.
Yeah, and I think House of the Dead even was beating Virtua Cop in the sense that it had some edge to it. Just like talking with the Time Crisis thing, it time travel's cooler than just being a cop. And, you know, the Virtua Cop, the scenarios they were throwing at you would be like, some guys are robbing the jewelry store, there's a heist, you know, that's just not as cool as a mansion filled with zombies or just time travel in general, which is always cool.
Or how about you're the first gay cop on the force, time to flamboyantly kill bank robbers.
Maybe that'll be on Fox next season.
Jesus Christ. Anyway, so Metal Slug also came out. This is a huge arcade for me, like a game for me. Like I really love the Metal Slug series. Mm-hmm. So to me, it was like, yeah, that was a pretty good game.
That also really stands out too in all the ones you're listing here, outside of Pokemon, just because it wasn't that big 3D sort of title.
It was kind of like perfected the 2D aspect. Because I mean, has there ever been a console or a system that ran that game perfect? I always feel like every time I play that game, I always have to have like a bunch of slowdown.
No, you got to go to the arcade.
Yeah, okay. Nights into Dreams, which is a huge game for Sonic Team because this is their big debut. They're leaving. This is the artist formerly known as Sonic Team moment where they try to like leave Sonic and be known for their own new IP. Mm-hmm. Virtua Fighter 3, which launched the Model 3 arcade board. Super Mario 64 was a huge game. Some people would say the best game. What are your thoughts on Super Mario 64? And were you so excited when you first played it?
I didn't own a Nintendo 64.
You never played it in the mall or anything like that?
I played it at a friend's house. I thought it was all right. I'll be honest. I don't know. If I can't just like pick up and play a game, I kind of get frustrated, and I didn't feel like Super Mario 64 was very pick up and play for me.
I played it at the mall when it was first, I guess, seen. My friend's like, we gotta go, dude. We gotta see this fucking... Because he was all excited about it. I don't know what was the code name for this one. Dolphin, I think it was?
Yeah.
I don't know. He was all excited about it, so we went and I played it. And I was pretty impressed. The only thing that really impressed me was that it was actually like I could walk anywhere and that I could climb a tree. I was like, oh shit, you can climb a tree. That's it. Game of the year, guys. Let's get out of here. That's all I needed to see.
Oh, and just so people don't get upset, Dolphin was the GameCube. Ultra 64.
Oh, okay. Ultra 64.
That's why this isn't Nintendo talk, all right? We don't know our shit.
Barry had to look it up for me, but yeah. There was that. And yes, fact checking. So it was a good game. You know what? I could see 100% where people thought it was amazing. Because if you think about all these other 3D games we're talking about, it was very on rails. While Mario 64 let the camera pan out and move with you, and you felt like it was an actual 3D platforming game, and that wasn't really done. Right. Even Knights had a lot of on-rail segments.
Huge. It was a big on-rails game.
Of course. And this is also the debut of 2 more fighting games, which I think we were talking about the trend of 96 being a bunch of games they debuted that were trying to copy Sega AM2, and these are 2 other fighting games that copied Virtua Fighter. Dead or Alive and obviously Fighting Vipers from Sega, which is obviously made by Sega AM2, so they're just copying themselves, really.
Yeah.
But this is the height of the whole, like, we got to take this fighting engine and reuse it again. Dead or Alive used the same engine as Virtua Fighter. So, do you remember... I just remember that Dead or Alive was when it came out on the PlayStation, and my friend's like, oh, dude, I don't need to buy a Saturn. I could just play this one with girls, and it's better because there's girls in it.
I remember Dead or Alive being like the, like the fancy car, the fancy unattainable car of fighting games for me. Because I would rarely see it in arcades, and it was on a console that I didn't own. But I looked at it, and like, I'm not talking from the girls with boobs sort of.
Oh, you got the big old boobies.
But it looked so like nice. You know what I mean? Like the graphics and everything. And Virtua Fighter, I love Virtua Fighter, but like Dead or Alive just looks so classy. Even the name and the logo. Oh.
It just had the style, like, it even sounds awesome. Dead or Alive. Like, that just seems like you're leaving this arena as a winner or you're dead. So this is like fight for your life kind of vibe to it, you know?
Yeah.
Fighting Vipers is an interesting game because, we'll probably do an episode going more into depth on it, but I feel like it was very overshadowed at this point. Like, Dead or Alive was huge. Tekken was huge. Virtua Fighter took all the air out of the Japanese market for 3D fighters. I feel like Fighting Vipers just never got its little place in there. Like, later on, Soul Calibur came out.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the weapons aspect of it was killed. I feel like this is one of those games that probably shouldn't have even been there because it kind of didn't really add up to have so many of these type of games. But what do you think about Fighting Vipers?
Well, I think 1996 in general, like we've seen just going through these games, was oversaturated with light gun games and fighting games. And so you'd pick the one that you thought was best. So, for example, in 96, I feel like it was House of the Dead, Time Crisis, and then as for fighting, like I was mentioning, Dead or Alive and, Virtua Fighter. But with Fighting Vipers, it's a very cool game. I own it, I've played it, I love it. But I feel like it's kind of a hard sell for people because it's a new franchise. It's you kind of have to sit there and explain what makes it different from Virtua Fighter and these other games. What is it, like the breakaway armor, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool, but I don't know. I don't know how well the game did back then.
It's in the game also, the style was like, I guess we could call it at this point trendy at the time. Like Virtua Fighter was this is a fucking karate guy, this is a fucking dude from Jamaica and he's a big black dude, and then you have this old ass dude from China, and you know what I mean? It was just like stereotypical characters, kind of like a lot of games like Overwatch uses now, where it's like, hey, it's a cowboy, it's a ninja.
Yeah.
Fighting Vipers had like, hey, look, these guys are like, somebody took a bunch of drugs and like designed a bunch of people from the 90s. Look at, they're dressed so trendy. This guy has a skateboard. This guy has a bike. It's just a very interesting looking game. Like, everybody in the game is like a stereotype of the era.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I guess it has that going for it, but whatever. Anything else you want to say before we close the episode on the House of the Dead?
I just want to say that it definitely kicked off a fantastic franchise. I don't think it was the height of the franchise. Like we talked about Outrun in the last episode. I feel like the original Outrun has yet to be beat, even from its later games. House of the Dead, however, I think it was, it was a starting point for a much better franchise that I personally like the sequel the most, but then 3 and 4 are very good. Overkill's very good. If you can find the first one, though, play it, because it's historically, I think it's a very good game. I just don't think it's up there with the greats.
And this is the part of the episode where we tell you, hey, you should play it on this console or this. But since this has only been on Saturn and PC, there's not really much to add to that. I mean, you either play it in the arcades on MAME, is that what it's called? Or any emulator, or you shell out the money for the Sega Saturn or burn the Sega Saturn. I don't even think the Sega Saturn version is worth the money, to be honest with you. Just play the arcade version emulated. Get some light gun and enjoy it. But that's it for this episode of the SEGA Talk podcast. If you want to help support the episode, subscribe to us via iTunes. Just go on there, put SEGA Talk, and give us a review, but only positive one, because if you give us a negative review, you hurt our feelings, and that matters, guys. Come on. And if you want to suggest another game we should cover, make suggestions, or ask us a question, you could at segabits@gmail.com. Just put SEGA Talk Podcast as the header. Thanks for listening. Catch us next week when we cover something else. night.